Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, dear students. Welcome back to our sessions with the subject Human Resource Management. Today's topic is one of the most important topics when we talk about human resource functions. Now we will talk about the performance management and appraisal. Now before we talk about appraisal, we have to discuss the objectives coming along with this session. We have different objectives associated with this topic. Describe the appraisal process. Develop, evaluate, and administer at least 4 performance appraisal tools. We will also explain and illustrate the problems to avoid in appraising performance. Lesson discuss the pros and cons of appraisal methods. And finally, we are supposed to perform an effective appraisal interview. So, regarding these objectives, we have the following main contents. We will talk about the appraisal process, and we will discuss the appraisal tools used by companies. And it's important to talk about the problems that can be associated with the use of different appraisal tools and potential problems that can happen because of the poor planning, evaluators, etc. Finally, we will talk about the pros and cons of appraisal methods. Now here, as an introduction, it's important to know that appraisal method or appraising in general is one of the functions of human resource management. And we have 2 issues here to consider: performance appraisal and performance management. And both of them actually support each other. Performance management is something that is related to the top management to double check that what is done is achieving or helping in achieving the company's objectives. So that is why they rely on performance appraisal to make such kind of mechanism work. So performance appraisal here, setting work standards, assessing performance, and providing feedback to employees to motivate, correct, and continue their performance. So this is in general everything about appraising employees, including the 3 stages we will discuss inshallah in today's session. On the other hand, we have the performance management, which is an integrated approach to ensure that the employee's performance supports and contributes to the organization's strategic aims. So that's why we refer to it as performance management. Now we go to the need and importance of performance management. Actually, companies cannot let go of performance appraising because of different issues. For example here, quality issues is one of the things that companies usually concern, especially if you're talking about a very competitive environment. Besides considering the nature of the business itself, companies should also look into how things are done, the standards that are set, to what extent employees are following these standards or not. So the performance management approach is actually focusing on the total quality. So this is the first issue. Besides, companies and organizations in general have their own objectives, and these objectives can also come up with ideas. Companies can think of various strategies to achieve their objectives. So strategies set by the companies are actually meant to achieve the objectives of the company. So a company would like to achieve its own strategy, will try to check to what extent employees are following these strategies. So we have things to be done at the very beginning of formulating the strategy, and at the same time we have to monitor the evaluation and the implementation of the strategy itself. So that is why almost all companies, whether they're small, medium or big companies, would like to appraise the performance of their employees. So these are the things affiliating with the importance of appraising. Now here, why appraise performance? We have different issues. It is the basis for pay and promotion decisions. Now, we said before that we have 3 stages when we talk about performance. We have to define the standards, perform the appraisal, and then we have the outcome here. The outcome is something that the employee himself can be interested in. For example, the result of good performance appraising is actually promotion, can be a promotion decision. So based on the outcome of the employees and the performance that has been measured, So correct and accurate decisions affiliating with promotion and pay can also be made. Besides, this plays an integral role in performance management. We said before, performance management is quite comprehensive of the whole company, considering the whole performance of the company. So one way to do it is by measuring the performance of different departments below this kind of level. So that is why it is part of the performance management. It also helps correct deficiencies, should there be any, and reinforce good performance. So in disregards of the outcome, it can be either negative, so they come up with trainings to correct such kind of deficiencies or to eliminate such kind of problems. And at the same time, they should also reinforce good performance so that it happens again and again. And the last one, of course, it is useful in career planning. Decisions about this issue will be quite accurate considering the outcome of the performance appraising. Now, who should do this kind of process? We have, of course, different people involved in this process. Supervisors. So supervisors are actually the people who usually do the actual appraising. The reason why, because they are at direct contact with the employees, so they know things about the task, requirements of doing the job, and at the same time the collaboration, the behavior of the employee himself or herself. So those factors can help coming with the right kind of judgment about the employees. Supervisors should also be familiar with the basic appraisal techniques, and that is why human resource management should support in this point of view. They should also understand and avoid problems that can cripple appraisals. Now we're talking about supervisors. Supervisors can be different people from different measures. They can be engineers. They can be physicians. So techniques used in appraising employees can be very different from one organization to another. So that is why supervisors should work together and collaborate with the human resource management or expertise to come up with the right appraisal techniques, to study the potential problems that can really pop up while the process of appraising in order to avoid these problems. Supervisors should also know how to conduct appraisal fairly, which is very important. Now the rules of the human resource management or the human resource department. We said before, the people who do the actual appraising are the supervisors. However, they cannot conduct the work without the help of the human resource department. So that's why we have rules here. For example, human resource department serves as a policy making and advisory rule, especially the kind of business where supervisors have got nothing to do with management and business issues affiliating with appraising. It can be very technical kind of work. So that is why they have to work as an advisor rule. Human resource department should also provide advice and assistance regarding the appraisal tool to use. We said before, we have different tools we can use to appraise employees' performance. However, the right tool can be affiliated, can be related to the nature of the work itself, number of employees, the nature of the job that is done, task, etc. Also here, human resource experts and officials should train supervisors to improve their appraisal skills. They should also monitor the appraisal system's effectiveness, and they have also to correct any deviations from procedures. So that is why they have to work all along with the supervisors during the process of appraising. Now, before we talk about the appraisal tools, we have issues here. These issues can be unrealistic appraisals. Now, for example, there's something called soft appraisal. These problems can happen in a lot of businesses. So why should this problem happen? Soft appraisal means that the supervisors may come up with a favorable judgment about the employees, while in fact his or her performance is actually below what is said to be. So that's why we call them soft appraisal. Now the reasons towards such kind of problems is the fear of having to hire and train someone new. So if they come up with an accurate kind of performance appraisal, so the decision that comes after is maybe to change the employee. And accordingly they have to hire another one and train. That will take time and cost a lot of money. So maybe that would be one of the reasons why companies sometimes coming or adopting soft appraisals. Besides, it can be the unpleasant reaction of the appraised employee, especially if you're talking about high-ranking employees or in the top management kind of sections. A company appraisal process that does not promote honesty, that is another issue. So for example, if I appraise my employees according to what he or she does and that they deserve a promotion, so I might lose him in that very specific position that I need him in. And because of that, I might come up with a judgment about that person below his actual performance so that he remains in that position. So that's why integrity and honesty are actually very important features when we talk about appraisals. Now here, the hazards of soft appraisal. There should be some problems here. Consequences can be as follows. Of course, the employee loses the chance to improve by self-correction. Now, soft appraisal considers the employees to be good in terms of performance and usually hides any kind of deficiencies. So employees will not be able to spot out these kind of problems and will never correct such kind of problems. They will never seek for any kind of training programs that can help them enhance their capabilities. Employees forced to work at a dead-end jobs, or they may have to change jobs. Now, what are the steps in appraising performance? We said before we have three main stages. The first one is you define the job here. It's important for the supervisor or the appraiser to know the job, the requirements of the job, responsibilities, for example, kind of relationship, etc. Second one is to do the appraising performance, fulfilling the task, and finally providing feedback. Now we will take them here using the kind of tools, designing the appraisal tool. So what do we actually measure as we talk about the performance of employees? Here we can either measure the generic dimensions such as quality, the quantity of the work, timeliness of the work itself. Now these things are actually very important if you're talking about manufacturing industries. So that would be quite easy. Now the strategy of the company that is adopted by top management can define either quality or quantity to pursue while measuring the performance of the employees. Sometimes we may have to develop appraisal tools that measure the competencies of employees. Here we're talking about strategies, for example, leadership kind of competencies. Service industries might require such kind of competencies more than manufacturing. Achieving one's goals can be another way of performing such kind of appraising employees. Now here, what kind of methods do we have as we talk about appraising employees? The first one, we have trait methods. In fact, we have two main approaches. One is about the traits of the employees. The other one is about the behavior of the employees. Now we consider the first one here. We have the graphic rating scale, mixed standard scale, the forced choice, and the essay. So for example, the first one, remember we're talking about trait. So we will be talking about certain kind of traits employees have. So they will be used as means to measure the performance. So the first one, the graphic rating scale method. It's a trait approach to performance appraisal whereby each employee is rated according to a scale of individual characteristics. Now, such kind of individual characteristics will vary from job to another. So, a set of characteristics will be defined, for example, punctuality, performance, intellectuality. So, these are things we can use as traits in order to measure the employees with. The other kind of method is mixed standard scale method. Now, this approach to performance appraisal is similar to other scale method, but based on comparison with, better than, equal to, or worse than a standard. So that's why we refer to it as mixed standard scaled method. Now, here's an example. Appraisal employees' performance in present assignment. So where the supervisor have to check most appropriate square. So these are ways that companies can adopt in appraising employees, but of course information put there, characteristics will be totally different from one job to another, and of course from one company to another. Now the third one is called the forced choice method. Here it requires a rater to choose from statement designed to distinguish between successful or unsuccessful performance. Actually, we refer to this as forced because there's no space enough to come up with any kind of comments by the supervisor. So it's either to choose successful, unsuccessful as main factors in achieving such kind of task, which is appraising. For example, look at these examples here. 1. Works hard, works quickly, shows initiative, is responsive to customers, produces poor quality, lacks good work habits. So there will be no comments here. The supervisor, based on what he or she knows about the employee, should come up with the right answer to these questions. Now the last one, considering the trait method, is referred to as essay method. Now this requires the writer to compose a statement describing employee behavior. Now this can be a little bit more accurate than this one. Should there be enough elaboration about someone's kind of performance? So the more the supervisor thinks about the worker, the better he or she can compose a statement describing the employee behavior. Now the behavioral methods here, this is the second approach. In behavioral methods here, we consider the behavior itself. So the first one is called the critical incident, behavioral checklist, behaviorally anchored rating scale, or referred to as bars, and finally the behavior observation scale. Now the first one, the critical incident method. Now we refer to this one, critical incident, a set of events that have been designed or determined by top management regarding the required kind of job. Now the second approach that is used in appraising performance is more about behavior. So that's why we refer to it as behavioral methods. So the first one is called critical incident. Here these incidents are defined by the top management or supervisors regarding what should be done. So several tasks can be defined by the supervisor or the direct supervisor and should be somehow implemented by the employee, considering the quality, the quantity, the way it should be done. So we refer to these things as incidents, an unusual event that denotes superior or inferior employee performance in some part of the job. So here, the manager should keep a log or diary for each employee throughout the appraisal period and then note specific critical incidents related to how they will perform. So by this, they refer directly to the behavior of the employee. Another method used here, behavioral checklist method. So the rater checks statements on a list that rates beliefs. Rater beliefs are characteristics of employees' performance or behavior. Remember, we're not talking about characteristics here affiliating with, for example, traits. Rather, we are talking about the actual performance, behavior itself. And the third method is called behaviorally anchored rating scale, or bars. This consists of a series of vertical scale, one for each dimensions of job performance, typically developed by a committee, of course, that includes both subordinates and managers. Now, it is believed that this type of method is better and more accurate because it considers both quantitative and qualitative approaches, considering the critical incidents, for example, and the scale used by the trade. Here's an example of bars. So firefighting strategy here, for example, knowledge of fire characteristics. This area performance concerns the ability of a firefighter to understand fire characteristics to develop the best strategy for fighting a fire. So we have 1 to 7. Remember, we're talking about behavior. So 1 here is law. So we not change firefighting strategy in spite of the flashbacks and other signs that accelerants are present. So from 1 upward to 7, finds the fire when no one else can. Now this is an example of superior kind of capability by the performance. So we refer to these things as bars because we're talking about incidents, like critical incidents, but at the same time we put numbers here. So here we mingle, or we mix both kind of approaches, trait and that one of behavior. That is why it is better and more accurate than the other kind of methods. Now we have another method, which is the behavior observation scale, which is the last one. A performance appraiser that measures the frequency of observed behavior. Again, it's about critical incidents because we're talking about behavior. So we're talking about actual performance, but here we're talking about frequent or most frequent kind of behavior observed by supervisors. So preferred over bars for maintaining objectivity because you're considering only the frequent, preferable kind of behaviors by the employees, distinguishing good performers from poor performers, providing good feedback, of course, and identifying training needs. This is the consequences of using such kind of methods. For example here, focuses on product. We may have never. This is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this number represents the frequency of the observed behavior, and that is why this is quite accurate kind of method used by different companies. Now productivity measures, appraisal based on quantitative methods such as sales volumes that directly link what employees accomplish to results beneficial to the organization. So here we refer to what is actually produced, and if there's any possibility of measuring this kind of productivity in numbers, figures, so we refer to this one as productivity measures. So that will usually focus on short-term results, focusing mainly on the quantity of the product that have been produced. And then we have managing by objectives. Objectives have been set, and to what extent these objectives have been accomplished is a way of appraising the performance of the people involved in achieving such objectives. So the performance is rated on the basis of employees' achievement of goals set by mutual agreement of employee and manager. We're talking about mutual agreement because you cannot possibly set objectives that are beyond the capability of the employees and then impose them to do them. And finally, you're supposed to conduct appraising performance based on such impractical kind of objectives. That is why whenever we talk about objectives as a means of appraising, we talk about the kind of collaboration involving employees in setting these objectives, and of course we refer to it as SMART objectives. Now here, creating an effective management by objective program. Setting of the organizational goals is number 1. This is quite comprehensive, and then as we drop down, these goals should be translated into departmental goals. So that would be a link between both of them. As we achieve this one, we're actually in the way to achieve the organizational goals. Then the discussion of departmental goals among the people involved, defining expected results, like setting individual goals. Now those are the doers of these strategies. Conducting periodic performance reviews. Here to check upon the progress and to make sure that problems will not occur. Should there be any kind of problems, they should come up with remedies, for example. And then we provide performance feedback. Now the use of management by objective. We talk about objectives here in general, but when we talk about objectives, we somehow talk about the top. Okay, objectives at the level of the corporation, and then at the department that we talk about sections and individuals. So that's why sometimes a lot of issues may arise here. We have different problems here. For example, there can be unclear objectives set by top management. That will cause a lot of problems to the employees. Time-consuming appraisal process. Now, if I want to appraise the employees by the conduction, by the implementation of objective, I have to wait until all these objectives are achieved. So that actually takes time. Conflict with subordinate over objectives. Now we talk about subordinates as the main doers. So there usually is, or there can be a lot actually, a lot of conflict between the subordinates handling these or conducting these objectives and by the people who strategize and who set these objectives. Now, appraising performance, problems and solutions. So there can be some problems here as we talk about different tools, like, for example, rating scale appraisal problems. First one, unclear standards. This is number one kind of problem, causing problem in appraising the employees. So if the standards that have been set to appraise employees are not clear, the one who rates employees will not be able to appraise people fairly and accurately. Second one is the halo effect. Halo effect is to be totally impressed by one of the features of the employees, and then you generalize everything according to that feature. While he can be good at one of the features, for example, or traits, he may not be necessarily good at the others, and of course vice versa. Central tendency. This is one of the problems where raters usually tend to rate almost all the employees in the center. They're not very good, they're not very bad. And then we have either leniency or strictness. Now these issues are more up to the raters. So some raters can be very lenient to employees, so maybe almost all the employees will be very good or above the expected from the employees. While on the other hand, at the other extreme, so raters can be very strict in rating employees. So this is another issue that can happen. And then we have the bias. That's another problem, which is rating employees based on irrelevant features. For example, gender, color, ideology, etc. Now here, graphic rating scale with unclear standard. This is an example of one of the problems that can happen while appraising performance. Now the quality of work, excellent, good, fair, poor. Now we're talking about unclear standards because what does it mean to the company and to the employees here, to the rater as well, the quality of work to be excellent. So there must be some kind of figures to illustrate to what extent this should be actually good, fair, poor, or excellent. So what exactly is meant by good quantity of work? So should we talk about like, for example, 1,000 units to be produced? So we say it is good or not. So that is just an example of unclear standards. Now, how to avoid appraisal problems? Of course, we have to know the problems. Should there be any problems that can cripple and defame the outcome of the appraising, it should be studied very well. Use the right tool. Sometimes we can adopt more behavioral kind of techniques better than traits. Some other times it can be the opposite. So human resource management here, or the human resource department, should help and support and of course advise the supervisors on the right tool to be used. Another kind of rules human resource department are entitled to is to train supervisors. Now by training them, they can eliminate or reduce the impact of such kind of problems. They can also stop, for example, the crippling or the damage of such kind of problems that can happen while appraising. Control outside influences that can happen, of course, and keep a diary as a record that can be used later, either to compare or to check upon the progress of appraising methods, to see whether the current appraising method is good enough or as caliber or as perfect as the last one, to avoid problems that happened before. So keeping a diary is actually one of the good things supervisors or human resource department can help in avoiding potential and future problems. Now the last issue here, we will talk about quite briefly about the advantages and disadvantages of appraisal tools. For example here, if you're considering this tool to be used, graphic rating scale, one of the advantages here is that it is a simple to use, quite very common, provide a quantitative rating for each employee. And this can be good considering certain businesses. While on the other hand, disadvantages, standards may be unclear. How affect central tendency, leniency can also be a problem. Now the use of bars as another tool, it provides behavioral anchors here, very accurate. Now unlike this one, we're talking about the performance, the actual performance, behavioral, but the problem here, it can be difficult to develop because you have to come up with the incidents that should be done considering superior and inferior kind of events. Critical incident method, it helps specify what is right and wrong about the employee's performance. And that makes it clear and easy. Okay? But on the other hand, it is difficult to rate or rank employees relative to one another. In terms of comparing employees, maybe supervisors or raters may face problems here. Management by objective, tied to jointly agreed upon performance objectives. But the only problem here, it usually takes at the very least 6 months to 1 year to measure the performance of employees. Here we're talking about objectives, so that is why it is time consuming. So at the end, potential appraisers, self-rating here subordinates who should do the appraising. We said before, the one who's supposed to do the appraising is supervisor, but actually this can be done by many. So we have self-rating. In some companies, this can be applied by the employees themselves. Subordinates, surrounding, 360-degree feedback, including customers as well. The immediate supervisor, who knows more about the employee, peers around working in the same department, and the rating committee should there be. So people doing the appraising can be many. So the question whether we have to rely on one or two is a matter that should be looked at regarding the nature of the work itself, time, budget, etc. So there are some factors why companies choose either one or more. Now the last point in today's session is about the appraisal interview, which is the output of appraising. Now we come up with the interview with different types of appraisal interviews with the employees. For example, according to the appraisal, his job or his performance was satisfactory and it can be also promoted. So satisfactory and promotable at the same time. So the interview would discuss the need of the new or the future job position, requirements, the kind of training requirements, etc. The second interview is about satisfactory performance, but not promotable. So here it cannot be promoted. Promotions here is not a choice, but another choice within that can be discussed in the interview is, for example, incentives to be given to the employees for the good job he or she has exhibited. Maybe the performance can also be unsatisfactory, but there's a chance to correct that kind of performance by developing some kind of training, assigning the employees to do certain kind of tasks in other departments where he or she can gain enough experience and knowledge. And the last one, unsatisfactory, and at the same time it cannot be corrected. So this may result in firing that employee. Now, how to ensure the interview leads to improved performance at the end. This interview is meant to correct deficiencies or reinforce good performance. So that is why we have to tackle this issue. So clear job-related problems with the employees. So only relevant issues should be discussed. Set measurable performance targets. So by this, both supervisor and the employee will be clear about the targets. And finally, set an action plan and schedule toward the target. So there must be like a time determined and standards set by the supervisor to the employee. Okay, we refer to this one as target, toward the target, to help them, to help the employees go on the right path. How to criticize a subordinate? Should we do that actually based on poor performance? For example here, do it while letting the person maintain his or her dignity. And doing that is actually by referring to job relevant issues. Criticize in private and do it constructively based on requirements. Give daily feedback so that there are no surprises. And besides, the amount of the things that should be amended will not be huge. Never say the person is always wrong. We have the environment. Sometimes contingencies that can affect the performance of the employees can be within the organization itself. Finally, criticism should be objective and free of bias. So the subordinates here who is being criticized should believe that what is being given to him as criticism is just based on the job itself. Finally, we have to write warnings if we are considering the poor performance of some employees here. So why we need to write warnings? There are the following reasons why actually managers and supervisors have to come up with writing or warning letters to shake the employee out of bad habits, which may be the result of the poor performance. To help you defend your rating, both to your own boss and, if needed, to the courts. Should this problem be raised by the employees, of course, or the unions? So a writing warning should, of course, here identify the standards first by which the employee is judged. Make it clear that the employee was aware of the standard. Specify deficiencies of the employees relative to the standard. So we go systematically. And finally, show the employee he had opportunity for self-correction. So by this, the company may not face any problems, or if this problem goes to the court, things will be justified, and as it was set systematically based on these steps, usually companies will face no problems. So by this, dear students, we come to the end of our session. So during the session, we describe the appraisal process. We also talk about the appraisal tools, different tools used by companies. We explain the problems and the ways needed to avoid in appraising the performance. And finally, we discuss the pros and the cons of appraisal methods. And for that, we have an attachment together with the session number 8, where you have to address questions affiliating with today's topic. Thank you very much for attending. We will see inshallah next session. Until then, I wish you all the best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.